should have known better than to take that shortcut through deep woods. Everyone in town had stories. Old ones, whispered about around campfires or drunkenly shared at barbecues, but I'd never taken them seriously. The woods were huge, dense, and eerie, sure, but they weren't supernatural. At least that's what I told myself. Until last Thursday night. It was supposed to be a quick hike. My buddy, Jake, bailed last minute, so I decided to go solo. The idea of being alone out there felt like a challenge. I figured I'd do a couple of miles, cut through the forest trail, and circle back before dark. Easy. The first mile was uneventful. The crunch of my boots on dry leaves and the occasional chirp of birds keeping me company. I even stopped to snap a few photos of the trees, their skeletal branches reaching out against a gray sky. But as I got deeper, the air felt off, colder. The kind of chill that creeps into your bones and makes you check over your shoulder, even when you know no one's there. About halfway through, I noticed something odd. The birds had stopped chirping. Not gradually, just silence like someone flipped a switch. No wind, no rustling leaves. Just the rhythmic crunch of my boots and my breathing, suddenly way too loud. And then I smelled it. A metallic tang, faint at first but growing stronger with each step. Blood. My stomach twisted as I scanned the area, trying to pinpoint the source. That's when I saw it. A deer carcass, half hidden in the underbrush. Its body was torn open, guts spilling out, and its neck, God, its neck looked like it had been snapped in 3 places. I should have turned back, but something about the scene felt wrong beyond the gore. The blood on the leaves looked fresh, still glistening in the fading light, but there weren't any flies. No tracks around the body, no sign of a predator. Just me. And whatever did that, I told myself it was just an animal. A bear, maybe, or a pack of coyotes. Predators were common enough out here, but my gut said otherwise. It wasn't just the scene. The silence felt alive, like the woods were holding their breath, waiting for something. I took a deep breath, adjusted my pack, and moved on. Turning back felt like admitting I was scared, and I wasn't about to let the woods get the better of me. But as I walked, the unease grew. The trees seemed closer, their gnarled branches like arms reaching out. And that metallic smell? It didn't fade. If anything, it got stronger, like it was following me. About 20 minutes later, I spotted something else. At first, it looked like a pile of rocks just off the trail, stacked in a neat little tower. But as I got closer, I realized they weren't rocks. They were bones. Small ones, like they'd come from rabbits or squirrels, but they were perfectly arranged, balanced in a way that didn't seem accidental. That's when I noticed the markings. Scratched into the dirt around the bone tower were strange symbols, loops and jagged lines that made no sense. I bent down to get a closer look, and my phone buzzed in my pocket. No signal, no texts, just a blank screen, glitching out like it was struggling to stay on. I charged it before I left. It should have been fine. A branch snapped behind me. I froze. The sound was loud, deliberate, and way too close. Slowly, I turned around, expecting to see a deer, maybe a coyote, but there was nothing there. Just the trail, the trees, and the thickening fog that seemed to creep in while I wasn't looking. Hello! My voice sounded weak, swallowed by the silence. No answer. I decided I'd had enough. Screw finishing the loop, I was heading back the way I came. But as I retraced my steps, nothing looked familiar. The trail seemed different, like it had shifted. Trees I was sure I passed before weren't there, and I couldn't find the marker I'd left when I stopped to rest earlier. I picked up my pace, my boots crunching faster against the dirt. I wasn't running, not yet, but I was close. My heart hammered in my chest, and the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Every so often, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, soft and deliberate, matching my own. Then I heard the whispering. It wasn't words, exactly. More like the rustling of leaves, layered with faint murmurs that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I spun around, trying to pinpoint the source, but the fog had thickened, and I could barely see 10 feet ahead. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they sounded like they were right next to me. "Who's there?" I shouted, gripping the hunting knife I always carried on solo hikes. My voice cracked, echoing back at me, and then I saw it. In the distance, through the fog, a figure stood between the trees. Tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that seemed too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It didn't move, just stood there, watching. I squinted, trying to make out details, but the fog made it hard to tell if it was even human. "Stay back," I yelled, brandishing the knife. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it took a slow, deliberate step toward me, the motion jerky, like a puppet on strings. My legs screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away. That's when I realized the metallic smell wasn't coming from the deer or the air. It was coming from it. The thing took another step, and I finally broke. I turned and ran, tearing down the trail as fast as I could. The whispers followed me, louder now, almost screaming. I didn't look back. I couldn't, but I could hear it. The crunch of leaves, the snap of branches. It was chasing me, and it was fast. I ran like my life depended on it because it did. The fog swallowed the trail, but I didn't care. Every ounce of survival instinct in me screamed to move, to keep going, no matter what. The whispers were deafening now, a disjointed cacophony of voices that sounded like they were right behind me, hissing, snarling, laughing. The thing wasn't just fast, it was relentless. I could hear it gaining, its footsteps heavier, deliberate. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't dare stop. Then, up ahead, I saw it. A faint glow through the trees. A fire? A flashlight? It didn't matter. I bolted toward it, the promise of safety pulling me forward. Bursting through the trees, I stumbled into a small clearing, nearly tripping over a moss-covered log. In the center was an old cabin, its windows glowing faintly with orange light. The place looked ancient, like it had been abandoned for decades, but right now it was my only chance. I didn't stop to think. I ran to the door, hammering on it with my fists. "Please, let me in. Someone's out here." My voice cracked, desperate. The door creaked open on its own. I froze. There was no one there, just darkness spilling out from inside. My rational brain screamed at me not to go in, to take my chances with whatever was in the woods. But the whispers were closing in, and I had no choice. I stepped inside. The air inside was thick and stale, reeking of damp wood and something else. Rot. The faint orange glow I'd seen from outside came from a single oil lamp on a rickety table. The room was sparse, just an old rocking chair, a stove, and a few shelves lined with dusty jars. I slammed the door behind me, bolting it shut with a rusted latch. My breath came in ragged gasps as I pressed my ear to the wood, listening. The whispers had stopped. I thought maybe I'd lost it, maybe I was safe. But then I turned around. The walls were covered in carvings, symbols like the ones I'd seen around the bone tower. They spiraled and twisted, their jagged edges glowing faintly in the dim light. In the corner of the room, a mirror hung crookedly on the wall, its surface blackened with grime. That's when I noticed the movement. In the mirror, something shifted, something that wasn't in the room with me. I stepped closer, my reflection rippling as though the glass were made of water. The figure from the woods was there, standing behind me in the reflection, its head tilted, those impossibly long limbs reaching out toward me. I whipped around, knife in hand. The room was empty. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself, backing away from the mirror. My voice sounded hollow, swallowed by the room. But as I turned, I felt it, a cold breath on the back of my neck. Before I could react, the lamp went out. The darkness was absolute, pressing in on me like a weight. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I fumbled for the knife. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it. Something was in the room with me. A creak came from the corner. Then another, closer this time. "Stay back," I shouted, slashing blindly with the knife. The blade met nothing but air. The whispers started again, louder than before, filling the room. The symbols on the walls glowing brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the voices. Then I felt it. A hand, cold and wet, gripping my wrist. I screamed, twisting and slashing with the knife, and whatever it was let go. I didn't wait to find out what it wanted. I bolted for the door, fumbling with the latch in the dark. The whispers rose to a crescendo, almost deafening now, as the door finally gave way. I stumbled out into the clearing, the fresh air hitting me like a slap. I didn't stop to look back. I just ran, crashing through the underbrush until the trees began to thin, and I finally saw the faint lights of the trailhead parking lot. I burst into the parking lot, my chest heaving, legs trembling. My car sat there, alone under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, but it looked like salvation. The whispers were gone, the woods behind me unnervingly still, but the dread hadn't left me. It clung to me like a second skin, a weight that pressed on my chest with every step. I fumbled my keys from my pocket, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds, expecting to see that thing standing at the tree line. The car beeped as I unlocked it, and I threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door and locking it. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition, the engine roaring to life. "Just drive," I muttered, my voice shaky. "Just get the hell out of here." The road leading away from deep woods was empty, winding through miles of thick forest before connecting to the main highway. The headlights cut through the darkness, the beams bouncing as the car sped over uneven asphalt. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something chasing me, but there was nothing, just the empty road and the dark woods beyond. I should have felt relief, but I didn't. Something was wrong. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, something reflecting off the windshield. But as I squinted, my stomach dropped. Far ahead, in the middle of the road, stood the figure. It didn't move, just stood there, impossibly tall, limbs too long, its head still tilted at that awful angle. My headlights didn't seem to touch it, the beams bending around it like the darkness itself was shielding it. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt. The figure didn't flinch. It just watched. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. I didn't know what to do. Should I back up? Drive around it? Charge straight through? Then it moved. Not toward me, but to the side, stepping off the road and into the trees, disappearing into the darkness. The way ahead was clear. I didn't think. I just hit the gas, the tires squealing as the car shot forward. As I passed the spot where it had stood, I couldn't help but glance out the window. The woods were pitch black, the trees dense and foreboding. And then I saw them. Dozens of them, glowing faintly in the darkness, watching as I sped past. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, unblinking, tracking me. My stomach churned, my skin crawling as I realized there wasn't just one thing out there. There were many. When I finally hit the highway, the weight began to lift. The world felt normal again. No fog, no whispers, just the hum of the engine and the faint glow of distant headlights. I didn't stop until I was home, locking every door and window before collapsing onto the couch, my body trembling with exhaustion. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those symbols, that figure, those glowing eyes. The next day, I went online trying to find any explanation. Legends, cryptid sightings, anything. That's when I stumbled across the stories. People disappearing in deep woods. Hikers going missing without a trace. Strange sounds, eerie sightings. One story caught my attention. A post on a forum about a cabin deep in the forest, covered in carvings, with a mirror that showed things that weren't there. The post ended with a warning. If you see the cabin, turn back. And if you see the eyes, don't stop running. I wish I'd read it sooner. It's been a week since it happened, and I've done everything I can to move on. But I can't shake the feeling that I brought something back with me. Sometimes, late at night, I hear the whispers again, faint and distant, as if they're calling me. And last night, when I looked in the bathroom mirror, I swear I saw a figure standing behind me. I'm not going back to deep woods, but I don't think it matters. Deep woods is already here.